Good afternoon, late afternoon. So we're back out of recess, and I am Vice President Sharon Green Middleton, representative of the 6th District. And to my left, we have Councilwoman Ramos of the 14th District.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And also to my right, we have Councilwoman Porter of the 10th District. We have the women of the council holding up the last moments of our budget hearings, and down to the very last agency, and one of the best agencies. We'll start off saying one of the best agencies in the administration. So now we're here to hear the Office of Equity and Civil Rights. And you said you have like a 12 to 15 minute presentation, and you can introduce your all of your staff that's here with you, and then we'll get right into the presentation. And then I think we have a few questions, and so we'll take it from there. So who's starting?
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Councilwoman Porter, Councilwoman Ramos, it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Kaylin Young. I serve as the Deputy Director of the Office of Equity and Civil Rights. Here, first and foremost, on behalf of our Interim Director, Karan Watkins, who unfortunately could not be here due to a pre-scheduled conflict. As you know, she was recently appointed to be interim, and this was pre-scheduled before, and we could not reconcile it. So she is watching and regrets that she had to be absent. As you all know, in the last fiscal year, we had a change in leadership. We recently had Dana Peterson-Moore transition out. We are grateful for the leadership that she brought to the agency in her 2+ years serving in that role, and we wish her well as she works on the response to the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapse. Again, with that, we have a change in leadership to Karan Watkins, who previously served in our office as the Deputy Chief Equity Officer. So she's come back, hit the ground running, and we are really looking forward to seeing how her leadership continues to move the mission of the office forward. In her stead, in the running point today will be the Chief Operating Officer, Mr. Roland Selby, who I'll be passing the microphone to shortly. And you also have our entire leadership team, who he will introduce, and I'm really confident that we'll be able to be as responsive as possible to your questions. And we just thank you again for a very long week, or I think 2 weeks, of budget hearings. Certainly just appreciate y'all leadership in doing that, and we understand how much time y'all have spent in this room. So with that being said, I'm going to transition it over to Mr. Selby.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Director. Good afternoon, Chair and the members of the Ways and Means Committee. My name is Roland Selby Jr., Chief Operations Officer for the Office of Equity and Civil Rights. I'm grateful for the opportunity to present our agency's fiscal year 2025 budget on behalf of Interim Director Karan Watkins, and to address any questions you might have. Today, I'm joined by, please raise your hand, Kaylin Young, Deputy Director, Zachary Wellman, our newest team member. He's our Equity Policy Analyst and Legislative Liaison. Akeem Kirk, Fiscal Officer. Lisa Kelly, Chief of Investigations. Araceli Stafford, Chief of Wage Enforcement Division. Danielle Burton, Chief of Community Relations Commission Division. Viola Willems, Chief Legal Counsel for the Mayor's Commission on Disabilities. And Jill Muth, Chief of Women's and Veterans Commissions. Today, we are seeking approval for fiscal year 2025 budget of $6,316,619, compared to fiscal year 2024's budget of $5,850,688. Fiscal year 25 is an increase of $465,951, which is an increase of 8%. I want to highlight that this year's budget abolished 2 long-term vacant positions as an enterprise-wide budget balancing strategy. This action is projected to save $197,000 annually. I want to point out that individual service budgets reflect position transfers and reclassifications that were done through fiscal year 2024. The mission of OECR is to advance equity, uphold the federal and local civil rights laws, enforce the local living and prevailing wage laws, ensure access and equal opportunities for persons with disabilities, and provide oversight of local law enforcement. Our fiscal 2025 goals are as follows. 1, strengthening the Police Accountability Division, which provides administrative support to the Police Accountability Board and the Administrative Charging Committee. Edifying the staff to provide support for the Equity Division. And last, creating the cohesion among the agency's divisions in support of our mission and expanding portfolios. We currently have 31 staff supporting the work that we do and to edify the boards and commissions that are legislatively created and under the OECR purview. Not currently at full capacity, we are actively recruiting and hiring to fill all of our vacancies. We currently have 5 services supporting 7 boards and commissions. They are the Civilian Review Board, the Police Accountability Board, Administrative Charging Committee, Community Relations Commission, Mayor's Commission on Disabilities, Wage Commission, and Women's Commission. Additionally, we support the Equity Division and are in the process of standing up the Veterans Commission, which along with the Women's Commission is unfunded. We are beginning discussions to add these as new services in FY26. It is important to also highlight that we'll be working to change the MCD from a cost center within Wage to its own independent service to reflect the critical importance of this work in advanced accessibility in Baltimore at a more rapid pace. At the start of fiscal year 24, services 844 and 849, the Equity Office and the Police Accountability Board, respectively, were added to the OECR. This expansion has led to a substantial increase in our staff, nearly doubling from 24 employees in fiscal year 23 to 44 in fiscal year 24. Throughout fiscal year 24, the OECR has been dedicated to recruiting personnel to effectively support and operate these newly added services. I will share a few highlights of OECR during FY24. The Office of Equity and Civil Rights was excited to announce the acquisition of the LCP Tracker software, a revolutionary tool set to transform wage enforcement in Baltimore City. This strategic move underscores the OECR's unwavering commitment to ensuring compliance with wage laws and enhancing the efficiency of its operations. The Wage Commission has acquired its first payroll compliance software, allowing us to operate as a modern city and eliminate the need for manual payroll audits and reviews. This acquisition aims to strengthen the OECR's ability to monitor and enforce wage laws and advance features such as real-time monitoring, customizable reporting, and data visualization tools. The software offers unparalleled capabilities for oversight, contractor accountability, and data-driven decisions. Seamlessly integrating with current process enhances the OECR's ability to ensure compliance with multiple regulations and also improves demographic reporting. Another impactful initiative that was launched since the last time we were before you is the American with Disabilities Act, ADA, Coordinator Network. We're happy to announce that we have 38 agencies represented and have scheduled 4 trainings for the current calendar year. Our last training was just held last week. Additionally, the Mayor's Commission on Disabilities, the MCD, staff resolved 40 ADA inquiries in fiscal year 24 and completed 8 in-person site visits to address claims of alleged inaccessibility of physical locations. The Community Relations Commission, or the CRC, facilitated or participated in numerous hearings this fiscal year, including the law enforcement hearing, which also examined the Johns Hopkins University Police. We also participated in agency hearings with the Department of Housing and Community Development, with the Baltimore City Health Department hearing forthcoming. Additionally, we now have a hearing officer to provide another level of review. Since we were last here, we successfully stood up the Women's Commission and are currently working to launch the Veterans Commission. In FY24, the Police Accountability Division worked tirelessly in support of the citizens of Baltimore, Nearly 1,000 complaints were received by the Police Accountability Board in calendar year 2024. Last, but certainly not least, the Equity Division has expanded to include an equity trainer who has provided training to agencies, boards, and commissions, as well as created a training schedule for equity coordinator programs. The Equity Data Analyst has launched an Equathon in an effort to gather and assess equity data through the annual equity assessment. So Service Area 656, the Wage Investigation and Enforcement. This service includes the Wage Commission and the Mayor's Commission on Disabilities. The Wage Commission enforces the city's living wage, minimum wage, and prevailing wages for employees of the city's contractors. In addition, the commission investigates complaints, issues orders for payment of back wages, and assesses penalties for violations. The fiscal year 25 recommended budget is $647,722 with 6 positions. Some highlights of our wage performance measures. The percent of wage cases closed in under 6 months. The target for FY24 was 65%, and our actuals for FY24 are 24 cases closed within 6 months out of 26 total, which is 92.86%. The percent of restitution collected out of the 26 cases, 1 still pending restitution, which is 96.3%. 534 employees have received restitution. Total amount so far is $475,838, including $165,000 in penalties. The Mayor's Commission on Disabilities is a cost center within the wage service. The MCD assists the city to increase ADA compliance in the form of accessibility of city facilities, programs, and services for people with disabilities. The MCD provides information and educational programs for city agencies, residents, and businesses regarding accommodations for employment and other issues concerning people with disabilities. The MCD has been hard at work since we added Chief Legal Counsel Viola Willems. While the MCD does not have investigatory power, they continue to field ADA inquiries and conduct in-person site visits to assess accessibility. The Equity Office Service 844, the recommended budget is $726,790 for fiscal year 25. This service coordinates the implementation of the city's equity assessment program established under Article 1, Section 39 of the Baltimore City Code. We conducted an equity coordinators training session this year, as well as trainings for several agencies, boards, and commissions on several topics, including racial equity, gender diversity, and restorative justice. Additionally, we hosted community conversations and supported data gathering and mining through an equity lens. Service 846, CRC, the Community Relations Commission. The recommended budget for the Community Relations Commission, or the CRC, is $1,731,160. CRC is guided by Article 4 of the Baltimore City Code to investigate discrimination complaints in employment, housing, public accommodation, health, welfare, and education. In fiscal year 24, CRC provided fair housing training to Project Place, which stands for People Lacking Ample Shelter and Employment, real estate agents, and other housing professionals. CRC has also conducted city agency informational hearings for the Department of Planning, DPW, Baltimore City Fire Department, Baltimore Department of Planning, and DOT. Additionally, CRC staff has conducted training on the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. Currently, CRC staff has conducted and closed 20 Equal Employment Opportunities Commission or EEOC investigations in FY24, including $12,500 in settlements and 2 Article 4 complaints, including a $9,000 settlement. Service 848, our CRB, Civilian Review Board. The recommended budget for the Civilian Review Board, or the CRB, is $1,033,149. Currently, we are interviewing to build up the CRB and recently submitted 4 names to the Mayor's Office of Government Relations. CRB staff attends multiple community meetings every fiscal year to inform the community about civilian oversight of police, misconduct, including neighborhood association meetings, public safety meetings, and back-to-school events. And Service 849, the Police Accountability Board. The recommended budget for the Police Accountability Board is $2,177,797. In 2024, the Police Accountability Board received nearly 1,000 complaints. Of these complaints, the Administrative Charging Committee, or the ACC, hears dozens of cases on a weekly basis. From June 13th to December 13th, 2023, the ACC reviewed cases in 23 meetings, focusing on those accruing since July 1st, 2022. The breakdown of the cases includes 32.3% closed with administrative charges, 15.7% administratively closed due to jurisdictional issues or duplications, and 52% closed without administrative charges. The ACC has heard approximately 650 cases since January 2024. Since its inception, OECR has hired a number of operational staff to support the work of the PAB and the ACC, including a liaison, case managers, a community outreach specialist, and a complainant advocate. We set to begin interviews for a complaint intake specialist next week and are currently advertising for several other positions. So in conclusion, council members, I want to extend my heartfelt thanks to everyone who has participated in this critical process. Your insights, questions, and contributions are invaluable as we work together to craft a budget that reflects our shared priorities and commitment to the well-being of our community. It has been an intensive and sometimes challenging process, but it's also been a testament to our collective dedication to responsible and transparent fiscal management. I'd like to especially thank the OECR Interim Director, Deputy Director, our division chiefs, our fiscal officer, legislative analysts, and a host of other team members for their contribution to today's presentation and for addressing our achievements with clarity and precision. Your hard work behind the scenes is evident and deeply appreciated. Thank you. We're now ready for questions.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. And I also want to recognize Councilman Z. Cohen that have joined us, representing the males on the on the council. And also shout out to Dana Moore has put together and created a pathway for your agency to really work hard and continue for the effort in the efforts of and for this office especially equity. And so I'm going to start with a question. I had heard you had mentioned, you had talked about training with other agencies.
Correct.
Was that training specifically with the equity officer that has been designated for the agency, or was it just group trainings for the agencies?
Both. So we've had training for our equity officers, but we also have conducted training within agencies.
Could you give us a list of the agencies that participate? Do you have data on the agencies that have participated with you?
We do.
And if there was an equity officer involved from that designated agency, we'd like to know that too.
Okay. We'll note that for follow-up, and I can present
Yes.
you with those agencies and
Yes.
contacts.
Did you get that over there? Okay. Thank you for that. And we'd like just data on the training that you conducted with the agencies, and particularly if an equity officer was a representative from each of those agencies.
Will do.
And we're going to go ahead and start from my left with Councilwoman Ramos.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks again to all of you for all your work. I have a question about the Wage Commission and wage enforcement. Do you we heard from the Small and Minority Business Office the other day that they will be working more diligently on inspecting for compliance with their own city contracts. I'm wondering, they still don't have Spanish speakers, by the way, so we need to worry about that for them. But I'm wondering how your office is working with them, if at all, and if the Wage Commission and Wage Enforcement, I know you do have inspectors, and so whether or not that's I believe it has to be reported before you can go on site, or are you going to be doing some proactive investigation or inspection for really any work site? It doesn't have to be a city contract.
Yes, my name is Araceli Stafford, Chief for the Wage Commission. We have become a proactive commission. We constantly go on site visits. We work with multiple agencies. We are trying to strengthen our relationships with the agencies that we work so we can be more visual to them and they understand what we do and how we do it. Again, the proactive is been working on it for the last couple of years. We're seeing results. We work very closely with Director Lundy. These partnerships, they refer to us. We also refer them to them. So the data that we have collected is improving. This year, we helped 534 employees to get restitution, comparable to last year that it was 461.
That's year to date, or is that
Yes.
fiscal year?
This fiscal year, up to date.
So from July 1 to now, or from January 1 to now?
From July.
Okay, so from July 1 to now, it's been about
534 people.
and the year before?
461.
Okay,
And out of the 534, only 4 were walk-in complainants. The rest were out of the internal audits that we do by being proactive.
great. Okay, thank you very much. Really appreciate your work. I have a very specific issue that I will address separately, but thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. We're just doing the one question
Yes.
rule that we did before? Okay.
Yes, thank you. And then we'll start from this other end, Councilman Cohen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to the office and to the various parts of the office. I want to talk about the Police Accountability Board, which I know the delegate has worked very hard on, as well as several of the folks in the in your office. I've heard some concerns that when it comes to the ACC, that cases are not being delivered in a expedient manner to the board, which puts the board in a challenged position of having to sort of double back and quickly mediate or address cases that really should require a significant amount of time and investigation. And I brought this up last night to the police commissioner. To me, that is a concern because we are talking about investigating the police department. And so if the PIB is delivering cases late and not giving folks at the ACC enough time to deliberate, investigate, do what they need to do, to me, that shortchanges the process. The response I got back was essentially there's shortage of officers and there's a lot of moving pieces, and I can understand that, but to me that's also unacceptable because we need this process to work because we need to restore faith in the department. I would just love to hear your thought on how it's going and how we can improve the process, the procedures, the protocol for how cases get delivered to this very important board.
I'd like to introduce Chief Kelly that can address that question.
Yes, thank you for that question. Lisa Kelly, Chief of Investigations with the office. So as you can imagine, we receive our largest number of police misconduct complaints from the Baltimore Police Department. And as a result of these challenges, our office has worked with Baltimore Police Department as well as our law department on the following strategy to address those issues. So the Baltimore Police Department will provide our office with a spreadsheet outlining cases that will expire in 30, 60, and 90 days from the year and day deadline that the ACC is required to provide a recommendation in charging. The BPD will also provide direct access to case materials for any case that is 30 days from that year and day deadline, regardless if they have completed the investigation or not. And direct access includes materials that won't change. So that's body-worn camera footage, CCTV footage, things of that nature. BPD will also provide staff to support ACC weekly meetings and be available to answer questions about unusual cases and also provide updated disciplinary history of police officers that have been administratively charged. And our office will also continue to work with BPD and meet with them on a biweekly basis, as well as with the law department on a monthly basis to discuss progress and implement any further changes if necessary.
Well, Deputy Director, I really appreciate hearing that. Unfortunately, what I've heard from members is that that's not happening in that way. And so I guess what I'm asking, and even last night, the police department, Commissioner Worley and Deputy Nadeau admitted that there are delays, there are challenges, mostly on their end, in facilitating prompt communication. I don't want to put words in the police department's mouths, but again, what I'm hearing from members is while that list that you just described is sort of the ideal world, that is not the world we're currently living in. So what I'm asking is, could you help me decode from your office's perspective where the rub is happening, where the deadlines are being not addressed within 30, 60, 90 days? Can you kind of help me decode? Because again, I'm hearing from members one thing, and even the police department acknowledged that we're not where we should be.
I will defer that question to Deputy Director Young.
What I'll say, Councilman, is this. What was just described was not in place. And that, particularly since you saw recently the news article with regard to it, that necessitated these conversations that we just described, these processes in regular meetings. We had regular meetings, but we've incorporated more senior leadership and making sure that we're a little bit more intentional about the granular details of where every specific case is. So, what we described, we anticipate moving forward will rectify many of those challenges. But again, that's something that's going to be ongoing. We do think that we need to revisit the law. Frankly, 1 year and a day, when we deal with the staffing challenges in BPD, really puts us on our heels. We, again, have pressed BPD to make sure that the ACC gets its 30 days, irrespective of where they are. And I honestly think that the law should change such that whenever we do get it, the ACC should have 30 days from that point. But again, that's state law, and we got to deal with that in Annapolis.
Yeah, no, and I do appreciate that, Deputy Director Young. And, to me, it is of the utmost importance that this process plays out in a way that holds integrity with what the folks who signed up for that commission, and more importantly, with what the general public feels is a process that honors victims of misconduct. I mean, this is one of those things where we as a city do not have a good track record, and we have to get it right within the process that you've articulated. And so I appreciate both of you spelling out what this should look like. My hope is that within the very short time span right now, that we are truly taking steps in that direction, because again, it just doesn't seem like all that is happening. And I think it is very important that our processes and procedures and protocols are being met, and that the police department is delivering on time and accurate information so that that important board can do what it's supposed to do. Thank you both, and I look forward to checking in on this in about 30 days. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. When you say you're checking in the 30 days, are you asking for something? Okay, okay, all right. Oh, I'm sorry, you recognize who you are. Oh, press the right button.
I thought I had. My apologies. Hello, everyone. My name is Simone Johnson. I serve as the Deputy City Administrator in the Office of the Mayor. In addition to what my esteemed colleagues have just shared with you, I want to also uplift for you that the interim director that is currently over OECR is Karan Watkins. She is a permanent employee of the Office of the Mayor. One of her critical roles will be to work on matters that, like the councilman has just raised, and that is to work on enhancing process improvements in collaboration with key stakeholders across the city enterprise. So she and her team will be working very closely to make sure they address some of the matters that you just mentioned.
Thank you very much, Deputy Administrator, and I know effective processes are something that you hold a lot of value in. I've seen your work, so I know that Director Watkins will do exactly that. And like I said, I just think for the city of Baltimore, it is extremely important that folks have full faith that these cases are being heard in a timely manner, that all the facts are on the table, and that folks who break the law or break the public trust are held accountable. So again, I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you for that. That is a priority for the Scott administration, and I work very closely with the office. It is in my portfolio, and we will make sure we keep you abreast of how we're working to enhance that process.
I would appreciate that. And if we could check back in about 30 days, I'd appreciate that as well. Thank you, Madam Deputy Administrator.
Thank you for that added information. And now, Councilwoman Porter.
Yes, I wanted to talk through the ADA or the Disabilities Commission. When is the last time you all met?
Chief Williams.
Thank you for that question. The last meeting of the Mayor's Commission on Disabilities was May 22nd. Generally, it meets the fourth Wednesday of the month, though during the summer and over the holidays, there are some exceptions.
Okay, and the reason why I asked that is because I've had members of the community ask me when you all are meet. So are those meeting materials public? Who's on the board?
Yeah, the meetings are all public meetings that are open to everyone. The agendas are posted on the OECR website in advance of the meeting. And then after the meeting, the minutes also follow. And the link to, the meetings right now are all held virtually. And so the link to the virtual meetings is included in the agenda.
Do you all have a council representative for the commission?
A council representative is one of the required members of the commission, but no one's attended in some time.
Okay, I recommend if that can be a committee request for you all to identify a council representative within 30 days.
Of course, thank you.
Number two, as far as, yes, ma'am. Go ahead. Yes, did you get that? Okay. Number two, as far as kind of an agenda, could you speak to some of the things you all are working on in that commission?
Sure, so a lot of the work of the Commission on Disabilities, some of it's done in the substantive committees of that commission. One of the active committees right now is the Transportation Committee that's working with MTA to address some safety concerns and other things surrounding how the mobility program can better serve Baltimore City residents with disabilities who rely on that for their travel throughout the city.
I love that, and that was actually where I was gonna go as far as transit and just transit options in general. Definitely working with us to kind of see what those transportation options are and how we can kind of bring some input and, input into this commission. My concern is that we are not branching out to all persons with disabilities. So there are many persons with disabilities that don't use mobility. And so particularly the deaf and hard of hearing, that community. So figuring out what that triage is and figuring out a plan to engage them in that commission as well. So I would love to see that moving forward.
Yeah, I would note that we have been working with the Baltimore City Association of the Deaf to co-host some trainings for both the general public and also a subset of first responders, because those are specifically individuals whose interactions with the deaf community is critical.
Yes, and particularly like crisis management and all that. So I'm glad to hear that. Is it one question or two questions this round, ma'am?
One.
Okay, I'll save my question for the next round. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and to circle back to me, since you're on that subject with disabilities, do you have a partnership with Department of Transportation with, you know, they came before us and they have an initiative as far as with the wheelchair ramps at the sidewalks and just trying to keep the maintenance of those areas clean and just some other things that they're adding more effort in that subject matter. Are you partnered or connected any kind of way with the Department of Transportation for that need?
I'm glad you brought that up. Actually, the Department of Transportation just provided a presentation at the last MCD meeting about their ADA transition plan and exactly those efforts. You know, the MCD is charged with taking that information out to the community and distributing it among, you know, its networks. And so that's one way that we're working with the Department of Transportation to connect with individuals out in communities. Also, the ADA coordinator at the Department of Transportation is participating with us in the ADA coordinator trainings that Mr. Selby mentioned. Okay. They've been relatively well attended, and just getting that partnership together, you know, they're also a wealth of knowledge because they have so much experience that we're happy to be working with them on that front too.
Thank you. Councilwoman Ramos.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just continuing the line of questioning on the PAB ACC, there's a lot of confusion about how this is going and also what is supposed to happen. My understanding, as was described earlier, was, you know, a complaint comes into the PAB, they review the complaint and then send it over to the ACC. The police department does the review. Their lawyer looks at it to say, yes, we can prosecute the case. No, we can't prosecute the case. And then, you know, the next step happens, whether there's punishment administratively or whether it goes to court. Is that fair assessment?
There's some clarifications that we would make on how you just described the process. I'll turn it over to Chief Kelly to walk you through that.
So thank you for the question. So the Police Accountability Board receives the complaint of police misconduct, and then we're required to forward that complaint over to the law enforcement agency for them to investigate. And then the ACC reviews the law enforcement agency's investigation, and then they make a determination whether the police officer. Yeah, okay, so then they make the determination whether the police officer should be charged or not charged, and then they also make a recommendation as to discipline. And then the next step is that if the police officer does not accept that discipline, well, let me step back. The law enforcement agency can increase the discipline, but they can't reduce it. So if the police officer accepts that discipline, then it's final. But if they don't, then they can ask for a trial board that can review the discipline at that point.
And I know that the PAB does not. Sorry, I know that the PAB does not have investigative powers like the CRB does. So we're not talking about the CRB. I'm just focused on the PAB. I've also heard from members that, you know, they are interested in having their own counsel review these cases prior to even going to the law enforcement agency, particularly since the law enforcement agency investigating itself is problematic. So can you talk a little bit about that request that they've made. Obviously, it's not in the law yet, I don't think, it's not. And so whether or not, how your office is trying to work through that request from the PAB.
Well, we've supported both, as an office and as an administration, both of those. And if I recall correctly, the administration testified in Annapolis this session as it pertained to investigatory power for our civilian oversight bodies. As it pertains to independent counsel, we also support that. The question is really how it looks. We advocate for that independent counsel to be a staff member of the OECR with a solicitor letter, similar to what Chief Willems has for MCD, which you might also see with the liquor board, such that they would have the ability to have the fiduciary duty to the board as opposed to the rest of the city in case if there's conflicts. So I don't think that's in our budget for this year, but that's certainly something, and those are things that we would certainly support moving forward.
Someone from the law department here? Because we had this a little bit during the law department, and they gave a different answer, if I understand it correctly. They were saying that there's only certain types of cases where they would, no, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. The lawyer for the police department is in the law department. And so what the PAB is asking is for their own, which would come under your shop. Is that correct?
They are, I think some of the advocates are asking for external entities to be their independent counsel, which we do not support. We do, however, support what I just described earlier, where there would be a city employee as independent counsel with a fiduciary duty to the board.
But that would fall under your shop and not the law department.
I believe so, yes, correct.
Okay, that's actually very important from a check and balances perspective.
Absolutely.
Right, okay. Interesting, so there's still some more work to be done on the law then in the General Assembly, or is that something that can be done now? You just need more additional dollars to be able to hire the person?
I don't want to get ahead of the mayor's office, but I just think that we are still building this plane as we fly it. And so there are certain things that take priority, and for instance, making sure these cases are handled appropriately is priority. Making sure we're staffed up is priority. And so I think Director Moore at a previous PAB meeting, I believe it was the January meeting, she mentioned that, we have not had any instances where there is a conflict that has arisen or a potential conflict that has arisen to necessitate the urgency to move forward in that regard. So again, therefore, the priority has been on what requires the urgency.
I understand. It could come up though, a conflict, yeah. Okay, but that is something that you're looking in the future as an agency to think about.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for clearing that
Thank you.
up for me. Thank you.
Councilman Cohen.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
So hold your thought. You want to comment on?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So, pardon me, Councilman Ramos, if you do not mind, and if you would prefer, we can provide you with an opinion for the law department if that would satisfy your inquiry.
I'm always interested in
Okay.
opinions from the law department. Thank you, but I'll also follow up with the agency as well. Thank you so much.
Councilman Cohen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to return to Councilman Ramos's line of questioning around the wage enforcement and just share that I've heard a fair amount of concern about wage theft, and I've actually witnessed a fair amount of wage theft in my district. I represent a very diverse population, lot of Latino folks from Central America, Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, some from South America as well. And I've seen over my 7 years representing that district quite a bit of wage theft and exploitation of workers. And when I think about even the Key Bridge tragedy, I know there's still a lot we don't know, but I have a lot of concerns about how many folks are being exploited illegally in our city, how much money is being stolen, not only from workers, but from us, the government, because when you are not paying, when you're doing subs of subs and you're not being honest about wages and you're paying under the table and you're giving people cash, you are not paying taxes. And so I kind of want to know from this agency, how how are we going to ramp up enforcement and change this culture within Baltimore where folks feel like they can get away with cheating and breaking the law and not playing on an even playing field?
Thank you for the question, and it's through compliance and enforcement. Like I say previously, we have become a proactive agency. We're a team of 4 that we are tasked to investigate, do compliance work, and do field work. I am the only Spanish investigator. I do recognize, and we did a study last year, and more than 50% of the population is Hispanic. It's the workforce. We see the need. By being proactive, by auditing agencies, that's something that it was not done before. We're doing that right now because there was so many contracts out there that we were not aware of. Baltimore City doesn't have a unified compliance system, so communication with the agencies, with vendors and contractors is key. And I'm gonna read back to the data. Fiscal year 21, we help 194 people get restitution. This year, we are at 534. And each year is gonna be improving. Also, a way to show compliance is by the number of late pay violations that we issue every year. The more late pay violations that we issue, the less compliance is going on the contractor's end. Fiscal year 2021, we issue 412, and this year we are at 198. That is showing compliance on our end. Our goal is to issue 0 violations. That will be the perfect world where everybody is compliant and doing, according to the code.
No, I very much appreciate that, and thank you for the good and hard work that you're doing. And I will just say that I think 4 folks is not enough. I hear pretty frequently from our friends in organized labor, in the carpenters union, in the building trades, that wage theft is rampant in the city of Baltimore. I see it with my own constituents. I see the hustle where folks will go and pick up day laborers and pay them under the table and cheat them out of wages and benefits. Do you believe, I'm gonna ask 2 questions. As a follow-up, do you believe that 4 compliance officers is enough? And second, do you believe that we need to change the penalties around wage theft? Because clearly there is a problem, because it just seems like this is part of the culture in Baltimore, is that people feel like they can cheat the system. And so, 1, do we need more capacity? And 2, do we need to stiffen the penalties for the folks that you all find are breaking the law?
Yes. I would like to mention first that we, as CEO Shelby announced, we have the first ever payroll compliance software for Baltimore City. This is huge. Everything was done manually before. Now, contractors are going to be required to submit this information into the software that we can analyze it, print reports immediately. This is going to be a game changer for Baltimore City. And I would like to clarify that as of right now, the Wage Commission only have jurisdiction on construction and non-professional service funded by the city. I understand there's a lot of complaints within wage and hour, minimum wage. We have a great partnership with the state. We work closely together, send referrals to them for those cases that we don't have jurisdiction over. And as far as the fines, it's tricky. The law says if you don't submit your payrolls on time, it's $10 per day that you're late. If you don't pay your employees the correct classification, it's $50. I'm always gonna be out for increasing those fines. It seems like when you get fined is when you listened, and that's something else that we have done. Whether you owe $10 or $100,000, it's exactly the same principle, and it seems like it's working out. Finding these constructors constantly, letting them know we are here, we see you, we know you're not compliant, here's your fine. So these have improved the compliance within the contractors.
Nan, I appreciate that. I think we just need to be really intentional about not creating a class of underground workers. And again, we all know what it is. Often these are folks who are housing insecure, who may be undocumented, who don't have an army of lawyers that can get them what they deserve. But I just think it is a pretty rampant practice in our city, and 4 officers seems like very few understand the state partnership. But when I look at my district, Councilmember Porter's district, and this growing new American population that we have, and what a blessing it is for our city, and then I hear about the rampant exploitation of their wages, it is a very, very deep concern. So again, I appreciate the hard work that you all are doing on this, and I think it's just something that we as a city need to be a little bit more creative in terms of, striking fear into folks that you can't just exploit some of our most vulnerable people and get away with it. So again, thank you for your work, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Cohen, for that line of questioning on that subject. As a former director of the state's apprenticeship system, I remember a number of, those were some of the problems that would come in, especially not following the federal guidelines of the Davis-Bacon Act. I don't know if there's been improvement specifically with those laws and regulations of that act as well. Anything new with that?
Around apprenticeships, no, there has
Okay.
been no any updates. We do work closely with the state because they are the ones that certifies the apprenticeships. We review that, the information is correct. We notice in some cases they have the ratio between apprenticeships and, a specialty was not according to the code, so we are actively reviewing for those, and this new software is gonna help us tremendously with that because we're gonna be uploading those certifications and the apprenticeships, rates and everything into the system automatically.
And paying those correct journeyman fees and
Yes.
so on. That's awesome. Councilwoman Porter.
I'm going to come back to the Disabilities Commission. I did have a question about ASL services. How much do we provide in our budget for ASL services throughout the city? It's either you or Director Larson would know that.
If you can give us a second to pull that
Oh,
dollar
yes.
amount, we'll get that for you.
Okay, thank you.
Could you clarify if that's dollars or people? When you say
No,
how much?
dollars.
Dollars.
Yep.
Could you repeat the question again?
Yes, sir. How much do we appropriate for ASL interpreting services throughout the city? Should be around about 161,000, if I'm not mistaken.
As I consult with my team, can you give me a second?
Yeah, no worries. I thank you all for staying close at 4:45. It's late. This will be my last question, I promise. I promise.
Just to give you some clarity real quick. So we were talking about, as mentioned earlier, MCD is under wage. So there's really no line item there, in the general budget for it. So they're just making sure that we give an accurate answer as to how we
Sure.
provide those services.
Thank you, sir. And if you
And
can't.
if it would be better, we can follow up with you?
Sure.
Okay.
And so the reason why I
Appreciate the
asked is because I believe it's currently one contract that you all use for ASL services throughout the city of Baltimore. And I wanted to know why did we choose that contract? How long have we been with that contract, and how can we move that closer to home, to like Baltimore? We have many hard of hearing and deaf companies here in the city of Baltimore that would utilize this contract.
And Councilwoman, I'll assist the OECR staff in pulling that contract information. I do also want to note that when agencies utilize these services, so like for example, we had ASL services at the taxpayer night, so
Yes.
that was paid out of the
Yes.
out of the user agency's
Yes.
budget. So there's not necessarily a line item in the OECR budget, and they hold the contract, and then agencies can use off the contract when they have different events.
Yeah. I'll connect with you offline because there is a line for ASL services. So we'll align offline.
Yes,
Thank
yes.
you.
And if you want to kind of answer that in writing when you submit your other stuff, you can as well.
Yep. The other thing that I'll offer, and we'll make sure to put this in writing as well, is some of the work that's happening at Charm TV as well for the ASL community. So some closed captioning, we procured some new technology. So we'll provide an exhaustive memorandum that outlines some of our efforts.
And you hit the nail right on the head, CA. One of the major issues that I'm hearing is that our closed captioning is not on Charm TV a lot. There's inconsistencies with the deaf and hard of hearing community with closed captioning and Charm TV and ASL services in general. And so I'm looking to kind of expand and increase and bring that contract home, because I believe the contract is on the West Coast, if I'm not mistaken, like headquartered on the West Coast, so I want to bring it closer to home.
Yeah, appreciate that. So, and appreciate you raising this important topic. So we actually have been meeting with members of the deaf and hard of hearing community around some of these very concerns. They raise concerns about closed captioning, our ASL interpretation services, and what we've committed to in response to some of their concerns is consistent coverage at press conferences, and even expanding that beyond just press conferences and also like taxpayer nights and other events. And then Charm TV, I believe, and I'll make sure that I get the details on this, I believe they ran into some challenge with the technology that they procured. And so they are working on updating or improving that technology, but I'll provide you a status update on where we are with that. But we've heard that community loud and clear, and we know that there's more consistency and standardization we can provide in our services, and we're absolutely committed to doing so.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Councilwoman Ramos.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Going back to the Wage Commission quickly, and I appreciate my colleagues' strong line of questioning here. It's a really fine line here, because I absolutely do not want our workers to be taken advantage of. Absolutely. I want them to work. And so I think that when we're talking about enforcement, we've got to make sure that people are paid properly, that they're getting either a 1099 or a W-2. When I walked onto a site, folks were getting paid by personal check or cash. Super illegal, bad. And we've got to make sure that companies understand what is the legal way to, because there is a legal way to hire our workers, undocumented or not. And so I think part of what my colleague was getting at, and what I'd like to think about, is whether or not, what education looks like, right? And education with a carrot and stick approach. Like, here's how you really need to do it. We really want to encourage you to do it, and if you don't, this is what's going to happen, right? So maybe we can work on something like that as an education campaign for that, because I think there's no doubt that there's one particular company I'm thinking about that knows exactly what they're doing. They are absolutely taking advantage of workers, and they're in court for it right now. But we just need to let everybody know that we know. Right, that's part of the issue. So I'm curious if you've thought through what that kind of campaign would look like, and if not, we can certainly help to work on that kind of thing.
Sure, thank you. We do education and outreach with contractors, but we relied on the agencies also. The most important two meetings for us are the pre-bid and the pre-construction meetings. When we come to the pre-bids, we're letting everybody know that is interested. These are the rules. If you decide to continue on under the prevailing wage, this is the overtime rule. This is how much you have to pay to your people, and these are the consequences if not. Also on the pre-construction, after the vendor has been selected, we reiterate the information. We have materials that we provide. We also take the initiative that after a constructor has been selected, we approach them and we offer one-on-one training. We want to help as many contractors get compliant. We understand there's challenges. I understand perfectly what you're saying, but we're constantly working to provide information. And as far as employees, site visits for us are the most important. Each investigator is required to go at least twice a month to a different site. And we use that as an education tool to the employees. Let them know what are their rights. This is what you should be paying. There is a retaliation law in Baltimore City. They cannot let you go if you're talking to me or this is happening. We also take that opportunity to talk about labor trafficking and human trafficking. We have materials in English and Spanish so far. We are planning to add, more materials in other languages. So, of course, there's always more that we can do, but we are being proactive there, and we are providing resources to both employees and contractors.
I'm thinking a little bit more broadly, because it's not just the city contractors, it's not, it's people that are, it's private industry, it's all of that. I think maybe that's a partnership with the state that we need to think about, because this is rampant,
Yes.
and we need to think that through. So maybe it's engaging the state as well and having a unified messaging, not just, when a contractor is selected, when one of us walks onto a site that happens to be a private, and the one that I walked into was a private entity. And so, how does that, we've got to think about that part.
Yeah, we've done some work, partnered with them. We did a few interviews last year with Somos Baltimore Latino, only Spanish. We brought somebody from the state, and I also provided some information about what is your rights, regardless where you work. So yeah, we can continue working on that.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And this is we kind of honed in onto construction work, but I think it has stretched to the hospitality industry as well. So I don't know if you handle hospitality differently, or a special way that you
That
do.
will fall under living wage. We don't do a lot of hospitality there, but we also, living wage applies to all non-professional services. So that will be your janitorial people, your security guards, the guys that help us on the Baltimore City garage, own. We do outreach for them too. We do outreach to the contractors. The rates there are a little different, but yeah, we visit. You're gonna see my staff and myself going into city-owned buildings, talking with the janitorials and the guys that clean here actually, and your security guards, to ensure that they're getting paid what they're supposed to.
Thank you. Councilwoman Porter, Councilman Cohen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To go back to the PAB and ACC side of the House, are we staffed appropriately in supporting these two boards? I've, again, heard concerns about lack of timeliness on cases from the department, the police department, but have also heard just a lot of flux in terms of how these boards are being staffed. And so would love to hear thoughts on that.
Chief Kelly?
I'll defer to Deputy Director Young.
We've dealt with some turnover, certainly in the Police Accountability Division. Certainly, first and foremost, we lost our Chief of Police Accountability at the end of the year, last calendar year. And we've had some other turnover therein as well. That being said, the reality of that division has been this. We've always been staffing up. When we started with myself and that same chief, building everything out and working day and night to get it really started to try to beat the deadlines for the initial cases that were backlogged, because if you recall, the city was a step behind everybody else building out because we had to go through the council process and some other stuff in Annapolis. But we are diligent in continuing to advertise for those positions, to interview for those positions. As previously mentioned, we are interviewing next week for a complainant intake specialist, and we have a number of positions currently advertised. We do currently have three case managers that are currently handling those cases before they go to the ACC. Myself and Chief Kelly have been assigned by Interim Director Watkins to be hands-on in a very significant way, more than previous, because our roles kind of span the bulk of the civil rights work, but we are really focusing right now on police accountability because it's required, given that we need to continue to staff up. So again, that is one of our urgent priorities.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you, Deputy Young. And do you have a timeline on when you suspect we will be fully staffed up?
You know, I don't want to give a timeline because, you know, the reality is people move. Sometimes you hire somebody, then they move, you know. And so, but that being said, we were really talking about this recently, and we really think that by the end of this year, and I don't want to, I'm just throwing a number out there, a date out there, but we really feel strongly that we will get to that point where, you know, we feel real confident, particularly with the leadership of that division being finalized real soon, and then everybody therein following as we have identified who will lead that division.
Understood. And again, appreciate your good work in this space. Can't overstate enough the importance of these boards being effectively staffed and having processes and procedures that hold integrity, both with the police department and with your office. We're asking folks to give of their time and either paying a small stipend or asking them to volunteer. And for the integrity of our city, I think it's absolutely critical that we make sure we are fully staffed, we are able to support them effectively, and that both the PAB and ACC are doing what they need to do to hold folks accountable and make sure we are rebuilding trust in our law enforcement. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Can I offer some additional context and commentary? I think between myself and Director Larson, we want to kind of make sure that we provide some color to the Police Accountability Board, and not even the Police Accountability Board. I think it's important that we talk about the Police Accountability Division, which is made up of the Police Accountability Board, the Civilian Review Committee, as well as the Administrative Charging Committee. All of those are under the PAD, which is the Police Accountability Division. Within the Police Accountability Division, we have, Laura, what is the total number of budgeted positions, or anyone can offer the total number of budgeted positions? 17? All right. So there are 17 budgeted positions within the Police Accountability Division, which includes those three commissions that I just spoke about. And so what this team has done is they've been working to staff up, right? And so right now, if I am not mistaken, I believe that we have 10 of those positions filled. Is that accurate? Is it 11?
11.
Okay, so we got 11 out of 19 positions that are currently filled, and we are in active recruitment for the additional positions. I think what's important, and what I'm gonna ask Director Larson to talk about, is the assumptions that went into the 19 FTEs that we budgeted for when we built out the PAD within OECR. Because I think there are some assumptions around caseload that aren't necessarily materializing, but that we wanna, you know, of course, still acknowledge, because we were building the plane as we were flying it, right? And so I'll have Director Larson talk a little bit about some of those assumptions. And then, Madam Chair, if you will allow me, after Director Larson talks through the assumptions around staffing, to go back to the independent counsel question that came up a little bit earlier, I'd like to address that as well.
Thank you for that, CAO Leach. So as you all will recall, when this legislation got passed in the spring of 2022, it was passed at a time where it was too late to incorporate the PAB into what was the fiscal 23 budget. So what happened in the time between when the legislation was passed and that fall was the OECR staff and staff from BBMR were working together to develop assumptions of what we thought caseload would look like, so that we could build out a really thoughtful budget that fully funded what we thought would be the demand. And so the staffing model that was developed assumed that the number of complaints would be double the highest number of complaints BPD had ever received in 1 year. And what we're seeing materialize is that the number of complaints are not at that level, which I think makes sense in terms of the reforms that are being put in place by BPD, some of the changes under consent decree. And so what we're seeing is that because the workload is not as high as what was assumed in terms of the staffing model, is that we're working with OECR to continue to refine the number of positions that are needed to properly provide this service. And as the CA mentioned, support them in whatever way we can to get positions through the recruitment process so that they can bring folks on board. But I do just want to stress that there was a lot of thoughtfulness that went into establishing this budget in that time between when that legislation was passed to when we brought the supplemental to City Council, and how the budget has rolled forward in 24 and now in 25.
Just so I'm clear on, so the CAD, that includes the Civilian Review Board, also the ACC and PAB?
Yeah, so all of that is under the Police Accountability Division within OECR, and the staffing for those three commissions all sit under the PAD, which is the Police Accountability Division in the budget.
But those costs are split into two services in the budget. Service 848, the police community relations, which would be the Civilian Review Board, and then Service 849, the Police Accountability Board.
Got it. Okay. And so we're looking for, you said 19 total positions?
Well, the budget director is confirming, but 19 is what I communicated.
So there are, in fiscal 24, there were 17 positions in the PAB. In fiscal 25, that went down to 15. And then in the police community relations service 848, there are 6 positions.
Got it. And currently we have 11 filled?
Yes, I believe that's what we just shared, 11.
Got it. One of those vacancies, tell me if I'm wrong here, is the chief of the Police Accountability Board. Is that right?
Yes.
Got it. Okay. Thank you, Madam Budget Director, CA, and Deputy.
And briefly, just to say, all of those positions aren't specifically dealing with cases. Like, a lot of that is built out for, outreach, build out for external affairs, dealing with MPIA requests, things like that. So just keep in mind that we are more staffed up with dealing with cases than some of that other auxiliary stuff.
Understood. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Councilwoman Ramos.
I just have one last one. In early conversations with Director Moore, she had asked and wanted to have additional funds for an equity assessment, like a citywide, top-down, in-out, backwards-forwards assessment. And I'm curious, what is the timeline of that? I also heard in your presentation, Mr. Deputy Director, that that there's annual assessments. I might have heard that wrong. So could you go over sort of the equity assessment work and what's being done and how that then gets implemented?
You know,
Thank you.
Just before the OECR team jumps in, I just wanted to remind Councilwoman that in fiscal '24, the budget added funding for additional staff to support the equity assessment and the funding for the contract for the equity assessment itself. And those dollars are continued in the fiscal '25 budget in Service 844, the Equity Office.
Thank you very much. I'm glad that that's still continuing. But can you tell me the status?
Yes. So since returning to the OECR, the interim director has been working with the Department of Planning to refresh and release the RFI to help us develop an equity study. However, the idea is that the equity plan will have a broad scope, assessing and addressing all of city government. Our goal is to hire a consultant or a partner with the academic institution to take a look at the whole city and assess all city agencies to make it equity plan more robust. That is where we stand now.
So the funding from '24 basically carried over to '25. It wasn't new dollars, right?
It was not huge dollars, yes.
Yeah, okay. And so that the work can get done this year. And so what is the timeline? End of next fiscal year?
We're still in the planning process, but we've started those conversations.
And the scope, I guess I'll look at my notes from last year, but the scope is what you also said, which was to look agency by agency. But isn't there work that needs to be done kind of looking at, you know, the sort of state of the city relative to equity?
Correct.
And then I'll just use equitable development as an example. We'll just use that as an example. So looking at the fact that we have a very segregated city, there's a lot of reasons for that, and really looking at how agencies should be working to address that issue so we have intentional mixed income communities as opposed to the segregation that we have now. Using that as an example, is that what we're really looking at, or are we only looking at performance of agencies, making sure that when they are performing, they are looking at equity? Example, my speed bump requests, making sure that my neighborhoods that are, that have asked for them for a long time and have been ignored for a long time on so many other levels, get them first before my other neighborhoods, right? Two different sets of equity, performance versus sort of looking holistically. Can you talk a little bit about that? Which one are we doing, or are we doing all of that?
It may be a little premature now because Interim Director Karan Watkins recently came back to OECR. So we have different leadership in place now. So I think it would be good to have an offline conversation and we can take your ideas and build into it. But right now we're just in the planning stages.
Yep. And thank you so much for that response. The other thing that I would offer, Councilwoman, I'm happy to have further conversations with members of the council and you as well about this. I think what's important is we want to do an overall just high-level assessment, needs assessment, but what we want to get to is an action plan, right? Where do we need to prioritize service delivery or investments because those places have been historically disinvested in? And so I think what we hope to have is a bit of a two-pronged approach where, you know, we do some analysis, but I mean, I think the analysis will tell us a lot of what many folks in this room already know. And we have so many brilliant minds in this city at our academic institutions that are focused on this work that we want to be able to bring to the table. So to the COO's point, you know, what we are doing at this point is planning and putting out that RFI, making sure that we get the right partners to the table that can help us start this work. But I think some of the most important work to come out of this will be what is the roadmap for, you know, reimagining, rebuilding equity in the city of Baltimore. And so, you know, it'll be that assessment, but then also working together to talk about actual actions that we can put in place.
Yeah, and I think that's what we had talked about with the director. Some of this comes from the trauma-informed work that is going on as well. And so I just wanted, because I had seen it in the budget and I wanted to make sure that we were still on task, but it sounds like we are sort of we didn't do it last year, we're doing it this next fiscal year, basically. And I'm glad to note that it's, and to hear from CAO that it is really that look, and then what are the solutions, and what that would guide city government and the rest of the city, frankly, in investments and in, the work. So that's good news. So looking forward to following up with you on that.
Yep, thank you. And Madam Chairwoman,
Yes.
Can I follow up with the councilwoman around independent counsel, the question that you asked earlier?
Yes.
Awesome. So I actually was able to talk to the solicitor because I wanted to be very clear about the solicitor's advice and her opinion on this topic. And so what the solicitor informed me and what is currently happening is that we actually have the law department and the legal affairs division within the law department that is supporting OECR and the PAB and serving as the PAB's legal counsel. If there happens to be an instance where there is a conflict, then the city solicitor would determine that there is a conflict, and then she would identify another attorney outside of the legal affairs division that would serve as the counsel to the PAB. So I just want to be clear about the administration's opinion and our stance on independent counsel. Right now, the work that the law department is doing, we believe to be sufficient, and we believe that work and the way that they do that work will not bring about any conflicts, or if there is a conflict of interest, we have a way to address it.
Thank you. That's not what I just heard from OECR. It's not completely.
Yeah, so I think, I just wanted to clear it up. I think what I heard the deputy director say around this topic was that we, as if the lawyer was in the city, like if they had a fiduciary responsibility to the board but was a city employee. And so what I'm further clarifying from the law department and from the solicitor specifically is what is currently happening, which is her lawyers in the legal division are serving as the legal counsel. And if there is a conflict with that lawyer, then we have other attorneys in the law department that can provide that legal counsel. So we don't believe that the law department serving as counsel to the PAB provides a conflict of interest. So I'm just further clarifying what the deputy director outlined.
I understand. I don't necessarily agree, because there is an inherent conflict that we experience here in the council all the time, whether or not the law department is representing the administration or the council, whether or not the law department in this particular case with the ACC is defending the police department or is going to be working to make sure that the police department is held accountable, right? That there is an inherent conflict there.
Yeah, and I think the solicitor would offer, especially with the example that you've outlined, what the solicitor would offer is the same thing that I would offer you, right? As the city administrator, I am a neutral party. I am appointed by the mayor. I am confirmed by this body. Same thing with the city solicitor. She's appointed by the mayor, but she is confirmed by the council. The city solicitor, she is your attorney just as much as she is the mayor's attorney. And so I think it is the same for the PAB and the lawyers within the law department supporting the PAB, and then BPD actually has their own lawyers, but of course they confer with the law department as well. So I understand your position on this, but I think the law department would say that they are your attorneys as the council, just like they are the mayor's attorneys and the PAB's attorneys.
I think this is a larger discussion that we need to have, because there's other types of examples where that just hasn't been the case. And so I think that, I just think it's an inherent, especially with police accountability, if we'll just stick with that for right now. I think that certainly the way that the state law is written for the PAB, it does not have the same investigative powers as CRB, right? So understood that that's the case in the investigative powers with the CRB, although it's extremely confusing for all the residents as to who do they report to. Different issue, we'll deal with that later. But I do think that if the PAB believes that whatever comes out of the ACC, process is not something that they would necessarily agree with, they're going to be hesitant to then go to the solicitor and say, we need representation because your lawyer over here is somebody that we don't necessarily agree with. That's all I'm saying. So I think it's something to explore further. Thank you. Thank you very much for indulging me in this conversation. I appreciate it.
So we'll end by hearing from about the Women's Commission. Save the best for last. Right. We know you went on a retreat, and I'm sure you have some good updates to share.
Absolutely, Madam Chair and Councilwoman. The Women's Commission, in terms of its relaunch, just turned 1 year old. We relaunched in May of last year. Since then, we have appointed 19 excellent members. We have 7 subcommittees. We are drafting and developing SOPs. We have 3 current high-level projects that we're working on, one of which is we are working with Baltimore Core Civic Innovator Program to develop a streamlined referral network for the city as per our mandate. And we are working with the Baltimore City Health Department on that, and their program, their platform is called Charm Care. So we are working to make that efficient both for residents and city agencies so that all city agencies are able to adopt that no wrong door approach. In addition to that, we received a $50,000 grant from the Carter Center. We're also working with the health department on that, and we are targeting what we call the sandwich generation, which are women that are caregivers who are giving care to an elderly relative as well as a school-age child. And we are targeting programming to connect them with the resources of the Family Caregiver Program that's housed within the health department. And then finally, we are currently working with the Moorhead Cain Foundation. We have 4 young scholars here from University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and they are working on a program to connect women with access to preventative health care. So those are just some of the high-level projects, but there's also the daily work of providing advice and counsel, workforce monitoring, and that's something that we are getting up off the ground, but we have an excellent group of people that we're working with, and I think, yeah, our Moorhead Cain scholars were in the back here, lovely young people.
Them,
yeah.
Awesome.
They were very excited to attend today and to observe these proceedings as, they're learning about civic government, so.
Thank you for that update. Any questions? Any more questions?
I would just like to take a moment
Yes.
of privilege and acknowledge that it is the women of the city council who are closing us out for budget.
Yes.
So, yes.
And on that note, thank you. As we said, we save the best for last. You have shown that you have some wonderful goals, performance measures, and you're progressing wonderfully. And so on that note, we're going in recess, and for further notice of another date that we're going to come together, it will be probably posted on the website. So thank you again, and we are now in recess.